Very good, thank you, team. And thank you to the organizers for having me here. It's a pleasure to see all these people interested in Pichia. It's one of our favorites in Mexico City, and I'd like to share a little bit about what Firmic is as a company, what we offer as capability and capacity, and then talk a little bit about some of the paths and some of the lessons learned to scale up. So it's going to be a tech light talk and sort of practice heavy. I'm happy to entertain questions at any point in the talk, but certainly if you want to wait to the end, that's fine too. So starting off with Firmic. So this is what we're going to talk about. I think I went through that a bit. I said a little bit about expectations of scaling process, and that really comes to what you should expect as a client company who's gone through process development, who's gone through strain selection, who's gone through DSP configuration. This is what it looks like when it gets to manufacturing scale. And I'm being a little bit pointed here and noting that we're not producing pharma products out of Pichia. That's more for the Lonzos of the world. So next slide, please. So Firmic's background is, it was founded in 1965 as fermentation microbiology. So Firmic is a concatenation of those words. It started contract manufacturing in the early 2000s with a company called Diversa. And there's a few Diversa alumni in the room here today, so that's how long we've been working with Pichia, with American companies. And so as a company that started in 1965, the initial focus was on antibiotic production. And so for a variety of reasons, the Falzoni family, who owns the company, and it's a privately held company, which is fantastic in many perspectives. And the father founded the company, and the brothers have continued to grow it. And so over the years, we've been adding capacity both in upstream and downstream, sort of concurrent with our own requirements as an antibiotic producer, a flavors and fragrances producer, as well as working as a contract manufacturing organization. So we're producing products in multiple verticals, FDA-regulated APIs. We produce a product called clavulanic acid, which we think is the best in the world, but the market seems to agree a little bit. We produce alternative proteins in a food GMP environment, industrial enzymes, including FAMI-QS regulatory oversight, flavors and fragrances, cosmetic and specialty biomolecules, and agricultural biologics. So again, we maintain a sort of a philosophy to keep a broad portfolio of products and verticals, market verticals, and we can be present through the ups and downs of the biotech market. And excuse me, there's not anyone in this room who's not familiar with the ups and downs of the biotech market. Next slide, please, Lloyd. So talking a little bit about our capacity, we have 2.3 million liters of fermentation capacity on site. This is our Mexico City site. This is the primary facility Firmic owns and operates. We have a second site in Hannibal, Missouri, which has about 1.6 million liters of fermentation capacity. That's currently decommissioned and waiting for the next investor to take it on. And then finally, we have a site in co-owned in Brazil where we produce products for South American markets. Again, we have 190 cube fermenters. These are all capable of producing products out of Pichia and are currently producing products out of Pichia. 2 90 cubic meter fermenters, 5 70s and 5 50s. All the fermenters are built to pharma grade and specifications. They're all stir tank reactors, aerated stir tank reactors with oxygen transfer rates between 150 to 180 millimole per liter per hour, which, for the process development, people in the room, is more than sufficient for Pichia fermentations, including my plus phenotypes. The plant is run on a Delta V distributed control system, and we have the ability to do multiple feeds in any of the fermentations. The downstream processing suite, so I kind of view things as in 2 parts. One is that the fermentation side of it is the generic part. So for the most part, and maybe we'll hear a bit more about novel bioreactors following me. a stirred tank fermenter is a stirred tank fermenter. What really discriminates between products and profit, to be honest, is the downstream processing plants and suites, and how good your DSP is, how efficient it is, and how pure product it results in. Really is a lot of the special sauce. And then finally, we have spray drying and agglomerization capacity in a sister company we call Dry Services. Next slide, please. So capabilities. I talked a little bit about the tanks we have, and I appreciate Peter having many photos of commercial scale equipment up to 75 cubic meters. The problem with 190 cubic meter fermenters, you can't take a picture of it. It's just too big and too tall. So this is, again, this can be picture light. But again, we have a 30 plus years working with Pichia pastoris, a whole range of different yeasts, Streptomyces, gram-positive, gram-negative bacteria, filamentous fungi, and algae strains. And we have experience as well in particularly the biomolecule market, doing co-solvent fermentations to concentrate those. In DSP, again, Peter showed you nice photos of biomass separation, some of the theory around that, microfiltration, ultrafiltration, solvent extraction, evaporation, and distillation. And so these are all things that can happen on the Fermex site in Mexico City. And we employ these daily to produce a whole range of products that I described a bit earlier. Next slide, please, Lloyd. And then just on the end of it, it's interesting because, as the world evolves and the product portfolio coming out of white biotech has changed, we see an increasing demand and desire to create products that are dry. Fermex is in its initial Pichia fermentations, everything was in an industrial enzyme, which was shipped in a liquid formulation. Now we see really this trend toward alternative proteins, which are typically ingredients for other products and are sold B2B. And so spray drying, agglomerization, fluid bed drying have become much more relevant in the marketplace. So tech transfer. Our business model is fairly simple. We ask that you show up with a robust process with a well-defined strain that has been executed at pilot scale up to about somewhere between 500 and 5,000 liters. We do that technology transfer to our pilot plant where we have 3,000 liter fermenters, a 5,000 liter fermenter, a whole range of DSP equipment sort of appropriately sized. The very typical Pichia process downstream is cell biomass, which again Peter talked about a little bit, microfiltration, ultrafiltration, and then typically either formulation in liquid product or spray drying. And to accomplish those things, we have both versions of distack centrifuges. We have microfiltration skids with a whole range of capacity and capability to purify as needed. You have skids and then drying and solvent extraction kits. We have, in addition to this, what we call a kilo lab, where much more complicated evaporation, solvent distillation, biotransformation can take place in a chemical environment. Just haven't necessarily called them up here. We saw a little bit of this morning about strain selection, and again, most of the practitioners in this room certainly recognize the difficulty in that and the challenge in that, coming up with a genetically stable strain that produces in a reasonable titer. For us, we want to see a strain that's has a robust production history. In many cases, we move past the muck phenotype in many Pichia strains, but it also shows up in other strains as well. And so thinking about how fast you can feed methanol, how fast you can feed carbon source really makes a difference in terms of how you're selecting your strain and under what operating conditions it can be executed at. Again, there's also this question of intracellular versus extracellular expression in terms of thinking of how the protein can be managed, how it survives transit through the downstream processing steps. Things like homogenization and bead mill grinding are mechanically very can be efficient, but they're also hard on biologics, they're hard on equipment, and they're hard on cost. And then I think the other piece that we pay a lot of attention to working with our clients is how do you do your strain selection, and are you using sort of industrially relevant conditions strains down to the fact of which kind of water you're going to use. Using RO water is fantastic for the lab, gives you a nice level playing field, but it's unlikely you're going to be able to produce 190,000 liters of fermentation broth with RO water. It's possible, but it also comes with a cost. And so that's just a very small example of where using commercially relevant yeast extracts, antifoams. I sometimes joke that if we've seen 101 customers every year, we've had experience with 110 different antifoams. Everybody has their own special antifoam they want to bring in and introduce, and so it's kind of from our side, it makes for a bit of a challenge trying to talk people into alternatives. Similar case with yeast extract. Everyone has their own favorite yeast extract. They want to bring it in, they want to use it. So just a couple of considerations at the strain selection stage. Next, please, Liv. So process development tuning. This is not things that we do at Fermic. This is things that you're going to do as a client coming to Fermic. You're going to have developed a process that's robust, that has a certain amount of tolerance, that you've identified the failure modes, and that you have a reasonable scale up, scale down model. From our side, it's fantastic. We worked with you in the past. When I used to work at Diversa, we had a 500-liter pilot plant. We worked closely with Fermic, scaling up industrial enzyme processes. And after the 16th process we scaled up successfully, basically we were able to jump from 500 liters to 190,000 liters. But that was because we sort of developed this robust scale up, scale down model. So I'll talk about it a little bit later in terms of engaging with your CMO of choice, but that's very, a critical point of it. You can really short circuit and shortcut your process getting to market. So the next bit, again, this is very rudimentary stuff, right? But thinking about an NDA, thinking about legal terms. If I wanted to pick the one thing that held up project timelines, it's usually working out the IP terms for tech transfer. We realize that your strain is your bread and butter. That's what you're banking your company and your product on. For us, it's also extremely important that we hold IP as critical, because certainly we're as careful with your IP as we are with ours and as we are with our joint IP. But I will say, anytime you get, any lawyers in the room? Anytime you get a lawyer involved, it's going to be complicated, and it's going to be expensive, and it's going to take time. So these are things we want to get ahead of early in the inception of the project. Next, please. So there's sort of a review of lab and pilot plant data that takes place in the tech transfer. What many companies tend to want to do is just show us their best 10 runs or the best 5 runs. We want to see all 30. We want to see the good, the bad, and the ugly, because that really helps us identify where we can find the failure modes, how we mitigate those risks, how we find paths that help you get to success more quickly. Success is being a step, success is measured as not just doing a successful tech transfer to firm, but also scaling up and producing products as quickly as possible. I think there's a couple of steps. So we do the tech transfer work. Thinking about tech transfer and scaling up is really there's a function of risk in this, right? We have many clients that come to us and say, I want to do 2 tech transfer runs. I want to go to commercial scale as quickly as possible, and I want some performance guarantees. That's fine. If your company and your team's philosophy of a high appetite for risk, you want to go fast, we're happy to work with you on that respect. But it's significant money. I think if I just was sort of ballparking a 50,000 liter fermentation, and DSP costs $100,000 per batch. And so you can spend a lot of time in tech transfer fine-tuning your system, fine-tuning the process that will be scaled up for that amount of money. But again, it's your risk. So we sort of take that into account in this step. Then the next step is executing an engineering run. The engineering run is sort of where you're doing all those cycles, all the recycles, all the process work, particularly in the downstream. And really it's, finding the right kind of water, finding the right kind of conditions to execute and come up with a viable product at the end of it. And at the end of it, we get a good assessment of what's required, not just from an OpEx perspective, but on a CapEx perspective. And that can also be a significant delay. There's a couple of business models with contract manufacturing organizations. Some have a fully dedicated line that's going to produce a certain amount of thing, a certain amount of product out of a certain amount of time. Firmic has a slightly different philosophy where we prefer to have dedicated clients that work with us year on year. And we have many examples of that where companies have been working with Firmic for 15, 20 years producing different Pichia products in particular over time. And that's sort of our preferred mode because it gives us the opportunity for repetition, for process improvement, for continuous improvement projects, both in the operating process as well as the CapEx. The other side of that coin is doing more of a campaign model where you approach us and say, I would like to run this process in this way. We don't have or do have the equipment necessary to run it. And then there's sort of a gap assessment in terms of understanding what the CapEx required is. Is the equipment the right scale? Is it the right flow through? Is it the right size? Is it the right purity? Is it the right, whatever the parameter might be to be required to optimize and deliver on your process? A couple of other corollary things that are just as important as tech transfer of the process. One is the analytical that goes with it. One thing that I won't say the NAFTA agreement has been a complete success because we have issues trying to send samples across the border the first time. Every time we send something the first time from Mexico to the US or Mexico to Europe, it sort of falls under a higher level of scrutiny and delay. But the point I'm trying to make is around the analytical methods. If you have an analytical method, it's best transferred to the team at Firmic. We have 45 people in our analytical group that can take most HPLC, GC analyses and replicate them. So rather than spending time shipping samples back to the US, back to Europe for analysis, we get them done the next day in Mexico City, we can actually cut time and speed your product to market. And again, there's a whole range of different things. I mean, I'm not going to spend any time on it, but you'd be familiar with doing the analytical method transfer round robins to get that level of security. And again, it's a process, a fermentation process for the downstream processing step. You may be talking about 90 to 100 samples at any one point that are tested for not just for product characterization, product titer, but also other metabolites, other salts, metals, etc. So that's, again, this is one of the things that has to happen concurrently. And then I think as important is the quality management. One of the places we see delays is a delayed engagement of the quality teams. Firmic has a whole quality management system that's been subject to FDA audits in the pharmaceuticals, in the food groups, in EPA audits, customer audits. And so what we really have is we've built this pharma FDA quality management system that's basically slightly detuned for the rest of the products we make. So U.S. clients benefit from a very robust client management system, a very robust team that is used to working with clients, working with auditors, working with third-party auditors to ensure that we have the highest quality product coming together, and a familiarity with working with your quality teams. I should mention, because that's not necessarily obvious, while the team in Mexico City is primarily Mexican, the contact points with external clients are all very fluent in English. Next one, please. So, just want to leave you with a couple takeaways. So, One is engage your CMO as early as possible. You might not be ready to scale up. We may not be ready to take your process and your product, but getting ahead of the curve is critical. Everything takes time. When I was working with Zymergen and I first approached other CMOs, and they would say it's going to be 6 months to get a tech transfer package done, tech transfer campaign finished. That just seemed mind-boggling. Now that I've been on the other side of it for 5 years, it's very normal, very rational. The second piece is determine unit operations and execute an equipment gap assessment. Purchasing anything in this post-COVID world is a year. You could round things up and say $1 year and $1 million for anything. If it's a centrifuge, it's a ceramic microfiltration system, it's a UF skid. And so, of course, you can identify those gaps in CapEx the faster your product gets to market. I'd say then the third piece is technology transfers best carried out at a very high level of engagement. We at Firmic view this as a partnership. You're successful, we're successful. You're not successful, we're not going to be successful. And so we have teams working dedicated to particular clients and working together. I think Peter showed an example where ceramic microfiltration was rejecting the protein at 90%. You see that and it just, how can that be? It's only 45 kilodaltons. But those are the kind of challenges you get when you go to scale up in tech transfer. And so again, we have a team that is dedicated to that, using the facilities that I've talked about a little bit earlier. And really, there's an opportunity and a benefit to working together, because as we work together on your process, we understand it better, and that scale up to 50,000 liters, 190,000 cubic meters goes much more smoothly. This kind of touches on it. If you don't hit all the success criteria, keep at it. This is really hard stuff we're all trying to do. It's not always said, but it is a truism that what we're trying to do is difficult. Our users don't want to make our product. We're coercing them. And so they're going to present us with problems and challenges that we didn't foresee. So again, there's value in keeping at it. There's also significant process improvement opportunity with repetition. A good example, and it's not a typical example, but we have a customer working in agricultural biologics, and we multiplied their productivity by 200 times by the 400th run. I know 400 runs sounds like a lot, but when you can go from 10 units per meg active ingredient to 2,000 units per meg active ingredient in about a year and a half worth of work, that's a significant cost savings, and that actually makes your business development colleagues very happy. I think then the fourth bit I talked about was the quality team engagement is critical. If you don't have quality, if you don't have the right assays in place, if you don't have the third-party labs to do the assays that you cannot do, you just end up waiting and waiting and waiting. So as I often look back on my career and think, I was a fermentation process development guy, and that's important, but it's not as important as DSP, and it's not as important as quality, and it's not as important as logistics. So there's all these things that wrap up and make a good tech transfer and a good scale up that have to come together and work in concert, work in symphony. We have 800 people at Firmic who are dedicated to producing your product, producing it cost effectively, and producing it on time. The next please. So in short, I'd like to thank the Falzoni brothers for bringing me on to their very, very exciting business. I've known them for 25 years. They are wonderful stand-up people. Firmic is a large family of 800 people working in Mexico City, and I've been lucky enough to have been invited to join them for the last 5 years. So with that, I'll end. Happy to take any questions from the audience.
Yeah, we're hearing a lot about continuous fermentation processes at these talks, and I just wonder, I mean, you're not presenting that as a capability, but I was wondering what your feeling is about that type of process and how it might impact, a stirred tank reactor at those scales.
No, it's a great question, obviously very pertinent. Equipment utilization is key, right? So there's a large attraction to continuous in terms of there's no downsides, there's no batch phase, there's no working towards your productivity. I think there's a couple of aspects around the other side of that argument that have to do with sizing. First, primarily sizing your downstream processing equipment appropriately. If you're pulling off 20% of your fermenter volume each day, that means in a 100,000 liter fermenter, you've got 20,000 liters to process every day. That can be done, but it means you've got a smaller piece of equipment than you might necessarily have. So that's one aspect. The other aspect, of course, is hygiene. Maintaining hygiene, even at a pH 3.5 fermentation for extended hours. I mean, sort of standard Pichia fermentation is about 120 hours. If you start thinking about 480, 900, 1,000 hours, it can be a challenge. Certainly can be done, but I'm not sure that it can be done routinely every single time.
Hi, the continuous fermentation would have been my first question as well. The second one, maybe I missed it. What's the cooling capacity of your largest fermenters? Like how low can you go with the temperature, let's say during metal induction of a typical Pichia fermentation?
So, probably around 25 C. So the fermenters themselves all have cooling jackets as well as internal coils. Internal coils are great for cooling, but they also present a tremendous amount of surface area for contamination. So again, it's a bit of a two-edged sword. We use chilled glycol in the cooling coils, so we can bring the temperature down pretty significantly. But if I was running in a regular fashion, I'd probably say 25 degrees is as low as you'd be able to maintain temperature in a highly aerobic fermentation.